you think all of these flowers are real, think again. Every single stem and every single vessel you see here was 100% thrifted. Today, I'm breaking down how to thrift and style faux florals for a realistic and designer look, what to avoid, which florals are actually worth buying, my favorite types of vessels, and a few styling tricks that make all the difference. Now, the plant section at the thrift store usually has a lot going on and can feel, let's just say, a bit overwhelming. So to make it simple, let's break down what makes florals look fake and what to look for instead. The first big giveaway is what I call the too good to be true look. Have you ever seen those blooms that are perfectly identical with no variation in size, shape, or color? Or petals that look overly vibrant like a popsicle? These things just scream unrealistic because we hardly ever see this with natural blooms. Instead, look for florals with softer and more muted tones, with subtle imperfections in shape and color. If you look at high-end designer brands like A Floral and Williams Sonoma, you'll notice most of their stems and foliage follows this pattern. Just the other week, I came across this gorgeous bunch of 15 Real Touch roses for only $6.99. Notice how the peach tone is more muted and has natural variation, rather than one uniform color. I also picked up 4 of these incredibly realistic hydrangea stems for $1.99 each, along with a few of these dried-looking ones for just 99 cents. When mixed together, the tonal variation makes them even more convincing because it mimics the natural aging process of real hydrangeas. Another dead giveaway is unnatural movement. I'm sure you're familiar with those overly shiny plastic-looking plants or have come across petals and stems that have a thick layer of that wax coating. This often comes across as tacky and again very clearly artificial. Let's be on the lookout for matte finishes instead and anything made with wire that can be easily manipulated. Now, in this unfortunate case, low-quality materials instantly cheapen the look of florals, and there's usually little that can be done to salvage them. I try to avoid anything with thin or fraying fabrics, visible glue, missing sections, or obvious assembly points. What you want to look for instead are stems with layered petals and construction details that disappear once everything is styled together. I sourced this entire bundle off Marketplace for just $10. There's like at least 10 of these guys, 3 of these. Oh, there's 4. There's actually 4. This last one is possibly the worst offender, and that is the all or nothing arrangement. Does fake water ring a familiar bell, or fake dirt that's literally stuck to the vase? Not only does this lock you into a one-dimensional look, but it leaves zero flexibility to swap pieces in or out, and also just reads as forced and tacky in my opinion. Instead, I always look for pieces that for the most part can be mixed and matched. I'll even test out different combinations and color palettes right there in the store. Now, sometimes if it's a pre-made arrangement, as long as it can be easily deconstructed without too much fuss, it can still be a win. This one had an abundance of beautiful blue and white stems, and I'll show you exactly how I repurposed them in just a little bit. Collecting and gathering the right florals intentionally gives you far more styling freedom and makes it super easy to refresh and rework different looks as your space evolves. And those of you that are familiar with this channel, you know that I thrift all of my things over time. I never do it all in one go. I think it's impossible to be able to find, say, all of this all at once. If you did, it would be at like a high-end store and it would probably cost a lot more. Okay, now that we've found the right florals, the next piece of the puzzle is pairing them with the right vessel. I'm going to share my top 5 favorite vessel types and how to pair them for a high-end look. First up are bud vases. What I love about them specifically is they only require 1 to a few stems, which makes them a very practical option if you're tight on florals or space. You can find all sorts of bud vases in the form of small bottles and jars, little ceramic forms, and one of my favorites, etched glass. You can also style them on their own or in groupings if you want a more intentional look. If you're going to do a cluster, try to choose ones that will complement each other in height and style. Also use florals in similar color or from the same bunch. Do you recognize these flowers? Also, when you're working with clear glass, don't forget to add real water. This is way more convincing than the fake stuff, and it's one of the best ways to trick the eye. On the more traditional side, you can never go wrong with a classic tall glass vase, especially one with an hourglass shape. These vases show off the length of tall stems and give your florals a polished and timeless look. Now, I couldn't find the footage, but this beautiful fluted vase was only $3, and just look at the beautiful detailing. I'll also be showing a full breakdown of how I style my large bouquets in the next section, so stick around. Next up, I can never get enough of crocks and stoneware. Not only do they already look great on their own, but they make a great vessel for all sorts of things, and they're perfect for bringing in a touch of cottagecore or farmhouse to your space. Fuller body florals or large and heavy bunches work really well in these crocks simply because of how sturdy they are. Some of you might remember this one, and I'll be showing you how to work with this unique shape in the next section. I've also recently been experimenting with turning serveware into vessels. Things like pitchers, bowls, pretty glasses, and even teacups are all my go-tos when it comes to breaking away from the conventional look and adding in some flair. Now, since some of these vessels are smaller in scale, they tend to work best with delicate, airy florals like baby's breath, Queen Anne's lace, or petite wildflowers. The other week, I spotted this gorgeous silver tea set from 2 aisles over and immediately made a beeline for it. At $19.99, it was definitely on the higher end, but sometimes when you come across something you truly love, it's worth the splurge. I also found the exact same set with only 2 pieces listed for $197, so I'd say I still did pretty well. Now, serveware like this works perfectly styled, almost as if it were a real planter. So I took some leftover baby's breath and a few blue delphinium stems and added in about 5 in total. I styled it on my shelves to tie in with my blue and white floral plate, and I just love the collected and lived-in feel it creates. It just goes to show that even the smaller florals, yes, even the faux ones, can still bring so much life and softness into a space when they're set up for success. And lastly, baskets are another one of my go-tos. I think they're great for really any type of floral depending on the basket's shape and size. I also find they emphasize that whole freshly picked stem look, especially when you add in those really large floral bunches. Look for natural materials like wicker, seagrass, or even rope at the thrift store. I picked up this seagrass one a while ago, and some of you may remember this photo by Life on Summerhill, which was my original inspiration. Well, I finally brought that vision to life. I added in the white iceberg roses from my marketplace haul and some of the yellow daisies from my stash. I'm loving the freshly picked and earthy feel it brings to my living room, and I think it's perfect for spring. And keep in mind, you can also easily refresh the look for any season simply by switching up the stems and adjusting the accent tones. Let me know what you think of both of these looks. I also picked up this guy for $2.99, and you'll see just how I style it in just a little bit. Okay, so we're gonna put everything together now, and we're gonna use this short and wide crock. And then we have our fluted glass vase, and then we have our open basket. So I'm gonna be styling my faux florals in all 3 of these. Today I'm keeping the focus on the larger arrangements that might not feel as intuitive. First up is a classic rose bouquet, and we're going big. I'm using a mix of artificial stems, including 3 groupings of similar toned roses, some extra baby's breath, and a few soft line stems to add movement and dimension. Now, the very first thing I assess is height and proportion. As you can see, these are too tall for the vase. This looks a little awkward, so... Stems are almost never the exact height you need, but that's the beauty of working with wired florals. You can bend, adjust, and experiment without commitment. Before placing anything in the vase, I created a small sample bundle using each type of stem. This helped me quickly spot any outliers and trim them down so everything felt cohesive from the start. And a good rule of thumb is about 1.5 to 2 times the height of the vase. Next, I'm cleaning up the stems. I'm going to remove all of the leaves that are lower, and they actually just pop right off like that, and then they can be put back on. So I'm just going to put them aside. Clearing up the lower stems keeps the arrangement feeling airy and lets the natural light shine through. Once that's established, I bend and place everything in the vase to create a rough draft before cutting the ends off. I'm aiming for a classic parachute shape, slightly fuller at the top and gently tapered towards the base. I'm also paying attention to tonal variation. Since the peach roses carry the most visual weight, I'm dispersing them evenly so the eye moves naturally around the arrangement. And while filler is usually the last step with real flowers, I worked mine in during the build to help balance the composition and get a full sense of visual weight, then made the final adjustments once everything was set. Now that the arrangement is the way I like it, I'm going to take everything out and we're going to cut off where the bends are. These stems were definitely thicker than I expected, but our heavy-duty hedge cutters handled them like a pro. Now it's just down to those finishing touches that pull everything together for a convincing and elevated look. And to give it a more realistic look, I'm just going to actually cut off these leaves. And so just like a natural flower would shed its petals, I'm going to then sprinkle these under the vase. So just here, kind of let them fall. I'm so happy with how this bouquet turned out. It's soft, feminine, and even though it's faux, I think it still brings a fresh look to the space. Let me know, would you be fooled by these florals? Next up, we're keeping this one quick and simple using some leftover stems from the other arrangements, including 2 eucalyptus stems from my wedding decor. For this open basket look, I wanted to look as though we had gone out into a garden and just picked these wildflowers. This is going to be a more laid back, loose look. I'm starting by placing the longer and fuller stems at the base to establish height and structure. Then I layer in the remaining stems, adjusting the positioning as I go. I'm going to kind of make it look loose yet gathered and organized, if that makes sense. Actually, I'm going to put in one of these white flowers, some more roses in. I also make sure to leave the shorter stems for last so that they don't get lost. And since this may sit at eye level or slightly above, I'm pulling a few bottom stems out to create that kind of overflowing look. This way it still has some visual interest if you're viewing it from below. So you could either leave it like this and have it as so, but then if you want a more dressy look, this is where this lace is going to come in. So I got this piece of fabric the other day for $2.99, and we're gonna just cut off part of this long part. To finish off with a slightly fancier look, I'm tying a loose knot to keep the stems in place. This gives the arrangement a more sophisticated feel and works especially well in spots where you're viewing it from above. I'm still deciding whether to style it in my entryway or higher up on my shelves. Let me know where you think it would look best for spring. And for this last arrangement, we're working with a shape that's not the easiest to style, but the payoff is worth it. I'm only using my thrifted hydrangeas here, but you'd be surprised how even the subtle tonal shifts gives this arrangement its quiet depth. So obviously these stems are way too big for the vessel. Luckily, this crock isn't transparent, so we can work with the stems without worrying about the mechanics showing. I don't like to have to chop off the ends if I don't have to. I'm going to keep the leaves on. I've used these hydrangeas for so many other things. I find that if you keep the leaves on, as you put the stems in, they kind of just stick to themselves. Like, it helps everything stick. And what I'm doing is I'm just going to basically bend this, and I'm going to manipulate it so that it's sticking out. And you're going to have to probably play around a bunch of times to get it the way you want. But now see, it's kind of sticking out like that. I'm just going to do the same thing with all of these. Let's see how that looks there. Now we're kind of getting them to the point where they're kind of at a good height here. Short and wide vessels like this tend to look balanced when the visual weight stays low and distributed. I'm layering the hydrangeas in subtle height variations to mimic the way they naturally bloom, full, rounded, and softly spilling over. There's not really an exact formula. I kind of just play around until I'm happy with how things are. So now I'm going to add in one of these. Since the dried hydrangeas are fuller, I'm placing them in areas with more negative space. That keeps the arrangement balanced while creating a natural asymmetrical shape. To fill the space in front of our fireplace, I'm styling this on a stool to add a bit more presence and height variation. I think the mix of textures really brings a natural and earthy feel to the space, and I love how everything came together. All this to say, there's nothing quite like real blooms, and I certainly use them whenever I can. But for those times when real flowers aren't accessible, or for anyone who doesn't have a green thumb, faux florals can still be beautiful when chosen and styled intentionally. They offer flexibility, longevity, and freedom to experiment. And yes, you can even find them at the thrift store. So tell me, would you be fooled by these florals?
Straight as a narrow flies, nowhere to be, no dreams to chase tonight. We've got time to waste, let's waste it right.
There we go. Actually, let's try that again. So just here, kind of let them fall. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, happy thrifting.
We've got time to waste, let's waste it right.